So you've received a self-tape request. The first thing that you should do is start filming, right? Not right. There are many things to do before you actually hit record and start filming a self-tape. Hello, welcome. Today I'm giving a detailed guide for how to film a self-tape. My name's Virginia and I am an actress and filmmaker from the Los Angeles area. I have worked both in theater and film as well as behind the camera, and I do have some opinions both from myself and from professionals around me as to how to film a self-tape. So the first thing that you're going to want to do if you have received a self-tape request is to go ahead and read all of the instructions. It is the most important thing on a self-tape, and people will ask for random things, especially depending on the type of production. So you definitely want to be sure that you are not wasting your time and filming in an orientation that you shouldn't be, or reading for something that you're not supposed to be reading for. Now, if you have never received a self-tape request before, the first thing that I would do before I actually get a self-tape request is go ahead and memorize and record a monologue in self-tape style. So basically you would follow all of the instructions that I give you as if you have received a self-tape, just to test it out and see how you feel about it. Or if you don't want to do a monologue, you can also request that a friend help you and you can record a scene. For many self-tapes, you will require a reader, so it's not a bad idea to go ahead and start with a scene that you found online. First, I'll start with what a self-tape is. Basically, a self-tape is when you record yourself following the instructions that you have been given for a specific type of role. This is something that you would usually be requested for after you have already submitted your initial information. So if you go on to a website such as Actors Access and you submit your headshot and your reel, you may then receive a self-tape request back. On some websites, there is the opportunity for people to go ahead and upload their own self-tape without receiving a request, especially in the case of open calls. But it is something that I've also seen on casting networks and Casting Frontier from people that don't want to necessarily go through everybody. They would prefer to see people follow their instructions and then send a tape back that relates directly to their project. So second, you would receive a self-tape request. Now these do usually have a deadline. So if you see a request via your phone or your email, make sure to take a look at the audition as quickly as possible. That way you can see what the expiration date on it is. Generally, self-tapes will give you a couple of days to complete them, but it can be a rush call depending on the type of project, or it can be a longer term expiration. Obviously, if it is a longer term expiration, you're probably still going to want to complete it in a few days and send it back. That way your tape gets in the mix faster rather than waiting till the last minute and ending up at the bottom of the pile. Also, I have seen some projects where the person set the expiration date for the day that the project starts, which means they probably already cast if you go ahead and submit that day, because obviously they're already filming. So in terms of instructions, they can be different for every project, but there are some basics that are generally expected. You are definitely going to want to film in the horizontal orientation, which means you're going to want to film in the orientation of this video, horizontal or phone sideways. If you're wondering if you can use your smartphone in order to record a self-tape, I would say yes, that is highly advisable. Basically, based on the way that most phones are, if you have modern Samsungs or iPhones, you're going to have a good enough camera quality that you are going to be able to film on your phone. If you have an extremely old phone, then you may want to record on a camera like a DSLR. But personally, what I have found is that my DSLR outputs a type of video file that doesn't work with my phone editor, which means that I have to convert the videos from my DSLR before I start editing them. And that obviously adds to the time and processing, which I don't really like. In general, casting directors are going to want to see the tape a little bit faster and are not going to want to wait for a high quality video. Also, many websites have limitations on how big the video file can be, so you definitely don't want to record it at an extremely high quality like 4K, because they will not be able to process those videos. Now, if you are doing a self-tape for a vertical short or a vertical web series, you are usually given the option to film in either vertical or horizontal, and that is up to you. What I've heard from some vertical short actors is that they still film their self-tape in horizontal style. They just film it with a little bit wider shot so you can see more of their torso, and then they send it in that way. But I've also seen some people who submit it in a vertical style just so they can see what the final product would look like. Another thing you're going to definitely want to make sure is that you can be seen and heard. There is nothing worse than a low lighting self-tape. I have reviewed many of those and I still don't know why actors send those in. You definitely need to have good lighting in your video, and it really shouldn't be particularly moody lighting either. Like this type of lighting that I have is not really what you want for a self-tape. You don't want an overly lit self-tape where everything looks white and washed out, but you definitely are going to want good, even lighting on your face so that they can see all of your expressions. In terms of sound, you probably can use the sound from your camera on your phone, but if you want, you can also purchase an inexpensive microphone. Now, self-tapes can come in one of two ways. Some companies request that you send each of your clips separately, especially depending on the type of website that you're submitting to. On Actors Access, you do have the option to submit individual clips, and that way they can see your self-tape and your slate and maybe even a full body shot completely separate without them all running together. But in some requests, they will ask that it all be uploaded in one file, which means that they want each of those things to come one after the other. Generally, the slate comes at the very beginning of the self-tape, but sometimes I have put it at the end of the self-tape, depending on what the instructions say. Now, in terms of a slate, you can generally say the same thing unless they're requesting specific information. Generally, it is going to be your name, your height, your union status, and where you are based. Now, during COVID, they were asking if people were fully vaccinated, but most projects do not ask for that anymore. Make sure that right before you decide to record your slate, you go back and double check the instructions again, because sometimes they do request that you have additional information in your slate. As a side note, I also generally like to record my slate slightly differently framed than the scene that I am doing. So if the scene is a little bit tighter and more dramatic, I usually like to record my slate a little bit wider. But if I'm doing something comedic and people can see my body language, then I usually like to record my slate a little bit tighter to my face. Now, you don't need to record a full body shot for every audition, but that is up to you. Obviously, if they request it, then you will need to do that. A full body shot is basically from your head to your toes with a little space above your head so that you're not being cut off by any type of weird camera situation. What I will sometimes do is film my full body in vertical mode. That way I can actually fit all of my body into the space, because depending on how much space you have, you may not be able to get the camera far back enough to actually see your whole body without including a lot of random stuff in the room. So if you film it vertically and then you put it into an editor, you can crop it so that it's just above your head and all the way down to your feet. And there will be a black bar on the sides, but that is not something that people tend to care about for specifically a full body shot. In terms of scenes, this will be something that is definitely very specific on your instructions. You can basically record whatever the scene is that they sent you, and they will obviously tell you which character to read for. Sometimes they request 2 takes, but generally they sort of only expect 1. If you want to send 2 and they haven't said please do not send 2, then you can send 2, but you want to make sure that the performance is different. What casting directors really do not want to see is the same scene filmed the exact same way 2 times. Now, I'm going to quickly talk about editing, okay? Editing is something that I know that actors are not super fond of. They do not feel like it's their job and they don't want to get involved in it, right? That is up for debate, okay? But something that you definitely don't want is for casting directors or agents or whoever you send this to see things that you don't want them to see. So I would recommend learning some basic editing skills. And I'm not saying that you need to go and buy Final Cut or Premiere. Those are very expensive programs for professional editors. But I would recommend that you look into an inexpensive editing software or free editing software if your devices come with that. The editing software that I personally use that I would recommend is not sponsored, but I do like to suggest it for people. It is an app that you would download onto your phone, and it costs $10 per year. Not $10 per month, $10 per year. That's how much it costs right now, and let's hope it all stays the same, okay? Because that is a very good price. Honestly, there is a free version of this app, but there are some restrictions, so I'm not sure what those restrictions are anymore because I haven't used the free version in a long time. But this software will give you basic things like cutting right after you're done speaking, or cutting before you're done speaking, modulating the volume so that you can make it a little louder or a little quieter. It also allows you to alter the colors so that if you need to bump up the brightness a tad bit, you can. It allows you to rotate videos. All of these are things that you will probably want to be able to do if you are filming a self-tape. Like I said, I usually film my full body shots in vertical mode. So when I go into my editor, I will crop it so the top of my head is, just below where the end of the camera line is. That way there's not too much ceiling in the shot. And I also sometimes will have to rotate it because the camera will default for it to be sideways because the rest of the videos are in a horizontal orientation. You don't have to get super detailed with your editing, but InShot does have a lot of things on it that I find are super useful for actors, including editing headshots and all kinds of things like that. So once you have completed your self-tape and you have it either cut into individual clips that are separate or one long video, then you would go and you would upload it to the website where they requested you upload it. Now, for most websites, you probably have already paid for the subscription to the website, so you probably won't have to pay again. If you are on a cheaper service like on Actors Access, then you may have to pay for each video that you upload. Right before uploading your video or while you are uploading your video, it can also be a good idea to go through the instructions one more time so that you can make sure you didn't miss anything. If you were wondering how common self-tapes are, the answer is extremely common. Most auditions are no longer in person because it just takes a long time for them to see every audition, and it also requires that everybody travel to one location so that that audition can happen. Self-tapes are also usually a first round of auditions, so they will take self-tapes from a number of people and then they will cut that number down to people who they want to see for an in-person audition. Also, sometimes it's not an in-person audition, sometimes it will be a Zoom audition or something like that. In terms of commercial auditions, sometimes they will ask you to improv to a specific set of instructions. Commercial auditions are more about personality and style and improv skills than they are about specifically reading directly from a script. Another tip that I would have is that I'm generally off book for self-tapes. I know that some actors say that you can have the script in your hand and then you just deliver lines back and forth while you're acting. That is an option that I have seen from people who are very successful. But when you're first starting out, I would recommend trying to be as off book as possible because honestly, I think a casting director is going to be a little bit more skeptical of a new actor not being able to actually memorize things and get off book than they are from an experienced actor who has a lot of work and maybe they just learned the script really fast, so they're not quite off book yet. Now, if you're interested, soon I have a worksheet coming with steps that you can take in your acting career, basically from beginning and end. It is a simple worksheet, but it does have some things for you to think about as you move from one step to the next. That way you don't get things out of order. After attending many classes and workshops with beginner actors, I decided that I would make this worksheet because I see so many people get overwhelmed and start trying to do things out of order, and there is an order to the way that you build a career in acting. So I made a simple worksheet for people to follow. If you are interested, please comment worksheet down in the comments and I will contact people when it's available. If you like this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you soon.